hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. I'm sure I might have met a lot of you, but for those who don't know me, my name's Kate Hook, and I'm co-convener here at Climate 200, as well as heading up the campaign support team here. And I've had actually quite a long relationship with Climate 200, having been a candidate twice in 2022 and 2025. So it's wonderful to be joining this amazing team and to be joining all of you who are part of the whole Climate 200 family. I want to acknowledge that I'm in Wiradjuri country. I'm in central west New South Wales, and also acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where you're calling in from tonight. I'd love to thank our guests tonight for their time and their support. So we have tonight joining us Richard Dennis from the Australia Institute, Zoe Daniel and Rex Patrick, the plaintiffs for the case, and also our own Simon Holmes of Court will be making a little presentation tonight. And as I said, we're just thrilled to have this many people joining. It's really encouraging to see how many people care about our democracy. A little bit of housekeeping. So this session, you might have noticed, is being recorded. So there are lots of you online, so we've kept you all on mute, but we'd love to see the crowd out there. So if you can keep your cameras on, that'd be lovely. Very happy for you to turn off even if you need to have a bit of dinner in between, but we'd love to see your face if you're happy to do that. The chat is open, so feel free to get on there and say hello and let us know where you're calling in from. And we will be opening to questions a bit later on, but that'll be not via the chat, it'll be via the Q&A function. And that should be done at the bottom of your screen. You might need to click on the More option to see that Q&A function. But if you're having any technical difficulties at all, please just put that in the chat and one of our team will help you out. So a little bit of context about the session. I assume a lot of people know why we're here tonight, but what we're here to talk about is the fair elections case. And that's Zoe and Rex's High Court challenge to the new electoral laws and why this challenge is so critical to the future of our democracy. I'm sure many of you might have seen the major parties describe these laws as a way to take the big money out of politics. So today we'll be unpacking why that claim doesn't stack up in reality. In reality, these changes are set to entrench the power of the major parties at a time when fewer and fewer voters are actually voting for them, and to make it harder for anyone else to compete. So the format for the night will be, I'll shortly hand over to Simon to do a presentation. Then we'll jump into a panel discussion with Richard, Zoe and Rex. Following that, we'll have about 20 minutes, I think it is, of questions. Yes, about 20 minutes of questions. And then we'll try to have it all wrapped up by 7 o'clock so you can get on with your evening. So thanks once again. And Simon, I'll hand over to you.
Very much to everyone who's joined us tonight. Before we go much further into the session, I wanted to just take a few minutes to run through run through a few numbers and explain why these new laws matter so much. Next slide, please. Cool. I can't see the slides myself. Here we go. Great. So on to the second slide, please. So the laws do two things. They control the amount of money coming into politics, and they control the amount of money going out, meaning the expenditure. Now, we're not against the control, good transparency, and making sure that that Australia runs fair elections is critical for a healthy democracy. But the problem I'm about to take you through is how these new laws massively tilt the playing field towards the major parties. Next slide. Now, where does campaign money come from? Significant amount comes from donations, a large amount from public funding. I'm not going to talk so much about memberships and levies, but the major parties take membership fees and, believe it or not, levy the income of their members of parliament on one side of politics. And also, major advantage the parties have is large investments, which they hold in entities that are now called nominated entities. Next slide. So the new laws put huge restrictions on the amount of money that can come in from donors, restrictions we haven't had before. Independents are going to be limited to a maximum of $50,000 per donor. And that includes from organisations like Climate 200, which represents 33,000 donors at the last election. So Climate 200 would only be able to we can take funds from donors, but we would be limited to only 50,000 per donor, whereas the major parties can collect up to $50,000 per branch. And so for a party like the Labor Party, that's $450,000 across the country. And there's 14 branches amongst the coalition. Next slide. So as an example, a single wealthy donor like Gina Reinhardt, she gave $200,000 to the Liberal Party at the last election. She can still do that under the new laws. She can give $50,000 to the West Australian branch, Victorian branch, and New South Wales branch, and another 50 to the federal branch, and split her donation amongst all the branches. So it doesn't actually have a significant impact on the parties. So we've crunched the numbers on the latest Australian Electoral Commission data came out last Monday, and we've crunched the numbers on what would the effect have been on different groupings of candidates at the last election if their laws had been in place. Labor would have lost just 2.3 million, with only one donor, Anthony Pratt, being impacted. The Liberal Party would have lost 4 million, with just two donors being impacted, Pamela Wall, a South Australian resident, and a smaller amount from a company called Arixium, which is associated with the Lowy family. However, independents who aren't as able to leverage public funding as others and rely on donations from people like those on this call, would have had their income cut back by $11 million, more than the Labor and Liberal Party combined. Next slide. If the laws had been in place during the last electoral cycle, there would have been another $67 million of public funding, of taxpayer funding, going to the political system. This is a 63% increase in taxpayer funding. Now, unfortunately, it's not distributed evenly. Next slide. For example, these three incredible independents who were supported at the last election and would have had their funding cut by these new laws would receive absolutely zero of this increased public funding before the election, and very little would go to them afterwards. Meanwhile, the laws allow this construction, the nominated entities, where each major party or each party is allowed to nominate one company from which they can receive unlimited funding. Each branch, I should say. And the Victorian branch has nominated the Cormac Foundation. That's a slush fund of $116 million of assets that come from ultimately the sale of a radio station that the state gave to them many, many decades ago. So the Liberal Party will be able to take unlimited funding from this group. Now, again, we've crunched the numbers, and with the parties losing some small amount of donations, but receiving the lion's share of this new public funding, the coalition will actually see an increase in their income of 7.5%, Labor of 12%, but the independents will lose 34% on average, with newcomer, non-incumbent independents or challengers as much as 45% down. Next slide. So that was the income side. Now on the expenditure side, the major parties under the new laws are allowed to spend $90 million on brand advertising across the country, whereas independents and minor parties can only spend $800,000 per calendar year in each seat. Now, next slide, please. Now, 90 million sounds like a lot, and if you divide it by 150, it's only 600,000, which is on the same order of magnitude as what independents can spend. But the parties don't spend uniformly. Typically, the parties will focus on battleground seats. They will give some focus to holding seats that they don't want to lose. But in a very large percentage of seats, they just run dead. They know that the seat is either super hopeless or super safe. And in those seats, they may spend only as little as $35,000. But here's an example of three seats where this kind of profile of battleground, hold seats, and running dead seats, with the benefit of a $15 million national advertising campaign, can fit snugly under that $90 million cap. And what this means for an independent challenging, in this example, if at the last election, Zoe Daniel ran against Tim Wilson, and we know that from the electoral returns that came out last week that Zoe's campaign spent $1.7 million. Tim Wilson's campaign will never know what was spent, but in excess of $2 million, and much more was spent by third-party organisations supporting him. Under these new laws, in 2028, Zoe would only be able to spend $800,000 on campaigning, and that includes campaign staff and events, whereas Tim would be able to spend $800,000 on himself, and the party can easily spend another $1.8 million above. So you've got a huge disparity, a factor of at least 3 that the incumbents can spend. And with that, I'll hand back to Kate. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Simon. And you've put so much work into that, Simon. Thank you so much for that presentation. So I'll just, before we jump into questions, I'll just introduce the panel. Not that any of these people need introductions, but let's do it properly. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Zoe Daniel, who, as you know, is one of the plaintiffs in this case and who was elected member for Goldstein in 2022. So hello, Zoe. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kate.
I'd also like to introduce Rex Patrick, the other plaintiff in this case, who was a former senator for South Australia. Thanks for joining us, Rex.
Thank you.
And Richard Dennis, who is the co-CEO of the Australia Institute and a long-time observer of politics. Thanks so much, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so first question, Zoe, you were inside Parliament when these laws were being passed. For those of us who obviously were watching from the outside, can you take us behind the scenes? What did it feel like and what did the process feel like in the chamber?
It didn't feel like a good faith process. A lot of it happened outside the chamber over a fairly long period of time. I think, having seen the writing on the wall after the 2022 election, the crossbench made some effort to make sure that we had representation on the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters. So Kate Chaney was on that committee, and it was self-evident to her in that election review that the government had the intention of making changes to donation laws. The thing is that it was very difficult for us to get line of sight or transparency over exactly what their intentions were. But over a period of a couple of years, it became clear that what they were going to do was going to be to attempt to advantage themselves to the disadvantage of independent challengers. The crossbench made a lot of effort to engage in the process with the government from the point of view that, you know, generally I don't speak for my independent colleagues, but we're all very aligned around the positioning of transparency of donations, around real-time disclosure. A lot of us were already doing that. I disclosed all my donations in real time during both my campaigns, or as real time as it could be. And getting big money out of politics sounds great. But of course, the devil's in the detail. And at the end of the day, this legislation does not do that. And what it does is tilt the playing field in favour of the major parties. And indeed, although it was quite difficult to engage with the government on it, when we did try to, we were told, well, the Westminster system is designed for 2 major parties, and which is code for suck it up, according to me. And then the legislation was pushed through very rapidly within a very short period in the last couple of sitting days of the 47th Parliament without an appropriate committee process. And it was one of the only examples during my 3 years as the member for Goldstein where I actually saw the 2 major parties collaborate with each other for an outcome. But unfortunately, it's not the kind of outcome that I think Australians deserve.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Zoe. Wow, it felt like we were there with you. It was such a great description. Thank you. And Rex, could you tell us the moment that you first heard about these laws and the moment when you realised just how damaging they could be to independence and to our democracy?
Yeah, so there's a funny thing when you wander around Parliament House. If you're not careful, you get knocked out by rumours that just jump out from all directions. And look, the bill was introduced in November 2024, but I had done an FOI looking to see what was going on back in October 2023, and and it would have taken a little while to sort of percolate through to work out. I need to look into to this. So the changes were on foot, as Zoe intimated. I think from very shortly after the election, lots of rumours running around. In my FOI, it revealed that there were letters that had gone to the Prime Minister, but of course they were all redacted. So FOI takes a little bit of time. I just couldn't press through to get the redactions lifted in time. So, and then of course in November when the bill was tabled, November 2024, of course that's when we realised the detail, and it was quite shocking actually. And that's when everyone started to kick in. And the Australian Institute, for example, looked at a great amount of analysis, as did many others, looking at how these things did stack everything in favour of the two major parties, or we might say three major parties now.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Rex. And you've always been such a champion of fairness and transparency, Rex. So it's so great to have you continuing that fight for us. Speaking of the Australia Institute, here's one for you, Richard, and it's a two-part question. So I'll prompt you on the second one if we forget it. So obviously the Australia Institute's done a lot of analysis on the electoral laws, both at state and federal levels. When you step back and look at the pattern nationally, part A, what stands out to you about these laws? And secondly, what do those laws tell you about the impact that the independence movement has had on Australian politics?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Look, I guess the thing about Parliament that perhaps people either don't think about or are just permanently disappointed in, but not really accepting, is that literally under our Constitution, it's our Parliament that makes our laws, and including the laws for how we have elections, how we fund elections, all of the rules are made by the people who won the last election. Like literally, that's the point of Parliament. So, unfortunately, a lot of the mess we're in here is because, for a long time, be careful what you wish for. There were a lot of progressives saying, oh, we need donation reform. We need donation reform. We need donation reform. What do you mean? Oh, I mean, donation reform. And that's a good sentiment. I share that sentiment. I'm not opposed to donation reform. But what that meant was that after independents and minor parties did so well in the 2022 election, the major parties went, oh, you know what would be funny? All their supporters are saying donation reform. Let's give them donation reform. What do you want, Labor? What do you want, Liberal? Let's hatch that plan. And this happens more often than people realise. The whole point of question time is to make it look like they always fight. But when it comes to fossil fuel subsidies or donations for minor parties, I promise you there's plenty of polite chats in Parliament. So yeah, unfortunately, rhetorically, everyone wound up in this situation where everyone wanted donation reform. But the way Parliament works, it's the people with the majority that literally get to make those rules. And, analogy I often use is, imagine if in AFL you let the grand final winning team make the rules for next year's draft picks. Right? That's what Parliament is. So we always just have to be cautious with this stuff. That said, thanks to the presence of the independents, thanks to the presence of crossbenchers, and thanks to the presence of some NGOs, including the Australian Institute, we certainly weren't alone, that were willing to have this fight, we were able jointly to put pressure within Parliament and outside of Parliament on Labor, on the Liberal Party, where, yeah, they just wanted a cosy deal that was good for the two of them, but a nice cosy deal that was quiet and invisible that no one noticed was what they were really hoping for. So, as is often the case, when you put the full light of day on it, the cynicism might still be there, but they see the risk, and the risk is, well, we might get what we want in the short term, but we might lose a lot of votes, a lot of support going forward. So, yeah, both the voice literally of crossbench MPs saying, I call bullshit, I see what's going on, you must be afraid of us or you wouldn't be doing this. That voice combined with voices outside of Parliament, I think made things better than they could have been, as in they could be worse. Going forward, it's how much pressure gets put on people in Parliament, whether we'll make them better this term or next, or worse next term or less. There is no victory. There is no finish line. As long as we have democracy, someone will be trying to change the rules. So, thank God you guys are running this court case. I think it's so important that these laws, having been contested in Parliament, now being contested in court, and whether you win the court case or not, and obviously I hope you do, even the attention that brings to these broken laws makes it easier to improve things going forward. Again, there is no finish line. It never stops. Sorry to disappoint you. But the reason that votes, the reason crossbench and independent MPs are seeing their vote do that, that's why people are fighting you so hard. It's because it's working. and you just have to own that. That's what winning feels like, hard work.
And thank you. You perfectly answered the second part of the question there. Thank you, Richard. And thanks for all the work that the Australian Institute is doing on this as well. Zoe, I'm going to come back to you. This is a huge deal. So taking on a constitutional challenge can come at great personal cost. Can you talk us through the moment when, knowing that, you decided to take this on?
Yeah, it's funny hearing Richard say, when you're under attack, you know that you're being successful. And as someone who's endured some very sustained attack, particularly in the 2025 election campaign, I took that as a compliment in many ways. Unfortunately, it meant that I lost my seat, apparently being such an existential threat that the pile-on was so enormous to prevent me from winning again. But it does say a lot about the impact that the community independents have had, are having, and I believe will continue to have on Australian politics. The thing about the court case, though, obviously, is to challenge this blatant attempt to try to shut that success down. I can't win it in general, although in my seat they won it by 88 votes, but they can't win it on the electoral battlefield, so they'll win it by legislating us out of existence, unless we take it to the High Court and convince the High Court that this is unconstitutional because it is a deliberate, overt attempt by the major parties to tilt the playing field in their own favour. So from my point of view, when it first came up as something that we should consider, I must say I thought, do I really want to run towards that particular fire or yet another fire? But, as you know, and probably most people on this call know, I was a foreign correspondent for a long time, so that seems to be entrenched in my personality. But I think that, the independents ran fundamentally on an integrity platform. And that's about accountability, that's about transparency, that's about making good policy, better policy, honest policy, and, really rigorously representing communities. Government and opposition, major parties should not be able to shut that down for their own ends. And that fundamentally, that's what this conversation in the court is about. We have a High Court to make these kinds of decisions, to make a judgment on what the motivation was for this legislation. We will put a fairly argued case in front of them through our amazing legal team, and we will leave it up to them to decide.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Zoe. And it's such a courageous undertaking for both of you. And so, Rex, I must say before I go to the next question, if people have questions bubbling up in their minds, remember to use that Q&A function, which you may find under the More button at the bottom of your screen. So the Q&A function is where the questions should go. Rex, this is a fairly simple one for you. Why is the court system the place to take up this fight as opposed to anywhere else?
Yeah, look, I might take everyone back to sort of 2018, 2019 with the government, the executive, because there's three players in this, the executive, the parliament and the judiciary, and they all keep a check on each other. And in 2018 to 19, the government tried to put a national radioactive waste management facility at Kimber in South Australia, except they botched up the process. And instead of retreating, what they then did was introduce a bill into the parliament where the parliament was going to select where the site was. And the reason they did that is because parliament is supreme. If the executive makes a mistake, the court can overturn them. But if the parliament were to say, this is where the site is going to be, there's no right of appeal because what the parliament says goes. Now, there's one exception to that. And by the way, so that because they couldn't get the bill through, the minister then made a decision, and ultimately the Bangala people took the government to court, and the court overturned the decision of the executive because they had botched it up. But that's illustrative of the checks and balances. The only time that you can have a court overturn the parliament is if they make a law that is unconstitutional. And that's where we're at. We've got the Supreme Parliament, even though we might say that it represents the duopoly. It makes the laws, and you can't do anything about that until you get enough numbers in the parliament to then change it back. These laws are designed to make sure you never get enough people back into the parliament to change those laws. And so the only choice we have is to go to the High Court and say to them, we think these laws are unconstitutional. They change the playing field that entrenches the political parties. And look, I'm actually, I hang around courts quite a lot. That's a nerdy feature of me, but so sometimes there's cases that has some significance. I'm actually quite convinced that the High Court will take very seriously its role to protect our democracy. So we've got a really good legal team, but I also think the High Court understands its role in these sorts of situations where that there is no other option, and it could change our democracy forever. I think they'll take our case very seriously, but that's why we're going to the High Court.
Such a great explanation. Thanks so much, Rex. And I'm not sure if you're seeing comments coming through, but there was a lovely one saying, I was so proud to have Rex Patrick as our senator. So thank you, William, for that lovely comment. Richard, if these laws are allowed to stand, what does that mean in reality for future elections? And what do you hope will happen if Zoe and Rex are successful?
Oh, well, let's start there. I mean, if Zoe and Rex are successful in the High Court, as Rex said, if the High Court says a law is unconstitutional, then it's kind of then the law doesn't come into effect, and it's up to this Parliament to figure out whether they're going to amend it or try again, or you have to see what the High Court said. But it could get thrown out. Parts, some provisions of it could be thrown out. But to be honest, that's great. But that's beyond our control. Like the court case is happening because of you guys. That's wonderful. It's being funded by people on this call. That's within your control. But what the High Court does, I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But what I can influence, what you could influence, what we can all influence, is what happens at the next election. And some people maybe misunderstand what I'm about to say or find it frustrating, but Politics isn't all about money. Democracy isn't all about money. You bet money helps. You bet it does. And that's why the major parties just changed these rules, because money matters. But if money was all that mattered, Clive Palmer would be Prime Minister today. All right? He spent $100 million and didn't win a seat. So, yes, money matters. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't have changed the rules. But what matters even more are great candidates with great campaigns talking about issues that voters care about. And you bet having more money on top of good candidate, good campaign team, good issues, good budget, yay. But good budget with bad candidate, bad campaign and bad policies has no chance. So I guess, my plea to everybody is, get involved in stuff now, support cases like this, work now to build the campaigns that are going to be needed in 2028, because regardless of what happens in the High Court case, what's really going to reshape our democracy is more people getting involved in our democracy. And in some sense, at a meta level, what we got told for decades, what I grew up hearing, was that politics was something someone else did, and Coles and Woolworths sort out your groceries, and Labor and Liberal sort out your Prime Minister. So moan about it all you want, but that's the reality, Richard, suck it up. Well, no, lots of people have worked for a long time to prove that it don't need to be that way. And now we see the primary vote of independent and minor parties rising steadily. The primary vote of the Liberals is just, the Liberals will be outpolled by the Greens in about a month on this current trend. So we have to understand that actually getting involved, both at a local community level, to get involved, find good candidates, run good campaigns, get involved in something abstract like High Court cases that literally shape the law of the land. Democracy is a participation event. Democracy thrives on high expectations. And it's the incumbents that want us to be cynical and think we can't make a difference. But as Zoe said, we're obviously making a difference, or they wouldn't be changing the laws. So, hopefully, court case wins. But you win the court case, still got to work your ass off in 2028. Lose the court case, still got to work your ass off in 2028. Both are true, but people running the major parties, they're not evil. They think they're best placed to run the place, but it's easier for them to run the place if everybody else thinks they've got no power. So never believe for a minute you don't have power. If you didn't have power, they wouldn't be trying to push you down.
Oh, what a brilliant explanation. Thank you so much. That's so good. I'm so pleased we're recording this, because that was the best pep talk ever. I think we're just going to play that within the movement over and over again. And how lovely that we're almost at 500 people joining this call now. So, talk about support. And speaking of support, Zoe, moral support or support in general for what you're doing. What comes next for this case, and how are you feeling that support yourself?
Yeah, so the case will play out over some time, as legal cases do, and probably particularly constitutional cases in the High Court. So we don't believe, any substantive action or decision making until at least the back end of this calendar year. The thing is, though, that I do take some points from what Richard said, which is that obviously the aspiration is to win the case and overturn the legislation, in which case the government will probably go and attempt to re-legislate around the High Court decision. And they did that on several occasions around different issues during the last Parliament. But in doing this, there are other benefits to our democracy. And one is self-evident with almost 500 people on this call willing to engage in this conversation. It's to do with taking back our power, asserting our control as citizens, being able to make our voices heard. And independents are an avenue to that for communities. So there's enormous amount of support for this, not only within my community, but from across the country. And even before I decided to be the lead plaintiff in this case, lots of people were saying to me, someone has to do something about that. Well, someone had to do something about that, and Rex and I are doing something about it. And I think that the bigger conversation around making government listen to the people and make better legislation is a really big aspect of what we're trying to achieve as well.
Fantastic. And I seem to remember that's a very powerful phrase for you, Zoe. Someone has to do something about this. I do recall you saying some small person in your life said something similar to you prior to running in 22. Thank you. Rex, the other side of that question, what support do you and Zoe need to help get this case over the line? What's the practical?
Well, there's a few things. We want everyone to keep talking about this. As was mentioned before, because the case is on, it does allow us to draw attention to what's going on. But at a practical level, actually, we do need funding support to bring on a case like this. And our team, just so everyone understands, is led by Justin Gleeson, SC, who was the former Solicitor General. And we've got some very good people, but it's going to take a lot of effort. But we also need to be mindful of what's happening around us. This is a constitutional matter, and so it's likely that every state in Australia will seek to intervene in the proceedings, which means we'll have our one or two guys and girls, legal minds, up against a whole range of Solicitor Generals from around the country. And look, I was in a hearing today on an FOI matter, so fighting to get access to information about where they're going to put AUKUS waste. And I've been in that hearing for 3 days. It was Rex Patrick versus about 7 or 8 other people that are in the tribunal, and so there's this disproportionate arrangement. The Commonwealth may load up their sides with some of the best minds paid for by the taxpayer. So the issue we've got here is that we've got the Labor and Liberal, or the Labor, the Liberals and Nats have in effect passed these laws that we challenge, but we don't challenge the Labor, Liberal and National Party. We have to challenge the government. And now, and they have very, very deep pockets. And, we just have to rely on everyone helping us out to try and even that a little bit as well. Again, we've got really good minds on this, but we do need support to help us get through this. Someone was asking on the chat, what's the appeal path? There is none from the High Court. We have to is right, and that's why we need help.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rex. And yes, we are definitely all in this together. So everyone on this call and beyond, we're all in this fight together. Thank you so much. And what fabulous panelists, because we're absolutely perfectly on time for when we're supposed to start questions. So I will just I'll direct questions. I'll read the questions that have come in, and I'll direct them. But feel free to unmute panelists and have a contribution to the question if it appeals to you. So first one I've got is, what's the ideal outcome? To revert to the status quo prior to the legislation, or to amend the legislation so that there's more equitable donation reform? Anyone want to have a say? Rex?
Yeah, so just so you understand, we're not taking on the entirety of the legislation. We can only take on the bits that we say are unfair and therefore are unconstitutional. So the best we can hope for is they do what's called legally severing those provisions. So we won't get a perfect outcome, but we will hopefully get those bits that are most unfair, the things that Simon talked about, declared invalid. The court won't replace those rules; they'll just declare that invalid. And then, as Richard indicated, then the Parliament will have to work out what they want to do. The good news there is that when the court makes its ruling basically informs people where the limits are, if the major parties do try and do something like that again, the Office of Parliamentary Counsel, when drafting the legislation, will tell ministers this is unconstitutional. So it's not. It is not. If we get some success here and create a precedent, it will make it much, much harder to try and do this again.
Fantastic. And Zoe, I'm not sure if this question was sort of partially covered by Rex, but just see if there's anything that wasn't from this one. So it's a few people asking for clarification on the legal or constitutional basis for the case. So what's the legal basis for the case, please? And yeah, I hope we get some details about the constitutional basis for the case. So have we covered that, or is there more to talk about there?
Yeah, so I can see Simon's been madly answering questions in the chat, which are coming through thick and fast, which is good. But in effect, the core of it is restricting freedom of political expression, which is entrenched in the Constitution. And so as the court considers that, they will consider whether tilting the playing field in favour of the major parties in terms of the way that they can receive and spend funding restricts freedom of expression for others, and those being not only independents actually, but also smaller parties or new parties who might emerge into the future who don't have the war chests that the existing major parties have. So that's the core of the issue.
Kate, can I just add one thing? I mean, I don't want to sound like, so again, I think what we're talking about tonight is so important, and I'm really appreciative of Zoe and Rex and Climate and 200 for taking this case. Full stop, new paragraph. This fight just never stops. As Rex knows, if you don't have good FOI laws, you'll never know what executive government is up to. If you don't have public hearings in your federal corruption watchdog, you can't get to the bottom of dodgy stuff. I've been playing this game for 30 years now. Like, I was Natasha Stott-Despoja's chief of staff for those old enough to remember a party called the Democrats, who at the time were complaining about electoral laws being used to make life hard for minor parties. So again, I know it's, I've been motivated by this. I'm not tired. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it never stops, ever. Because every election, you're electing new people who get to make new laws. And one of the laws they might make is a law to entrench their own power. So democracy won't be fixed one day and then we can relax. All right? This never stops. And we can hand the baton over to people when we get tired, but in terms of what comes next after this laws, fights about freedom of information, fights about corruption, fights about transparency, fights about ministerial diaries. It never stops. I think that's good, right? I think that's good, but fear not. What comes next? Lots of stuff.
And so I guess the moral to the story there, Richard, is stay involved and stay engaged. And
if you want change, and of course the people who don't want change, the people that are getting our gas for free, the people that are making bad decisions in secret, what do they want? They want you to be bored. They want you to be disengaged. They want you to feel hopeless. So you bet, if you want change, you got to be involved. But there is no one law that will come and make the rules fair, right? It never stops in a good way. Just like the rules of AFL have changed a lot in 100 years, just like the rules of cricket have changed a lot in 100 years, the rules of how our democracy works will change a lot in the next 100 years. And independents are creating turbulence. They're they're the grit and the oyster, whatever metaphor you want. All right. But they're provoking a reaction. That's good. But you then have to fight the reaction to the reaction to the reaction. And it's fun.
And it's coming from someone who, as you said, has had many years in the thick of it, in the belly of the beast, Richard.
Yeah, as have lots of people. I'm just saying, you got to pay attention to the long arc of this history, because otherwise you think one battle is decisive, and they all matter, but it's the sum of the battles that really matter. Could
I just offer, Kate, on that it's a little bit off off topic in terms of the High Court case, but of course all of these things intersect. And at the end of the day, what Richard's talking about requires courage. And, it's lovely to see, the comments in the chat thanking Rex and I, but everyone on this call is showing courage. All of our thousands of volunteers have showed courage. Everyone who's worn a T-shirt, put a leaflet in the letterbox, door knocked, which I know a lot of people find terrifying, turned up to an event, spoken to a friend, has shown courage. And it's beginning to weave the fabric of accountability that we need, that is creating exactly that kind of pressure back from the major parties. And that's a fantastic outcome. And it's hard. It is hard, but it is so worth it. So, from that point of view, thanks everyone for being on the call. But, we need more of you because that's where the accountability rests.
Oh, so brilliantly said, Zoe. Thank you so much. Yeah, so ongoing and lots of courage. I don't know which one of you would like to take this one. It's what is the dream result from the High Court case? What could it mean for the election laws and rules? How far could reforms go?
Well,
anyone want to have that one, Rex?
Well, again, obviously we want to restore a situation where there's not unfairness in the way in which you can raise donations and the way in which you can spend. But again, if we can get a precedence that's strong, like a unanimous decision across all 7 judges, it makes it really clear. If you get a 4-3 judgment, they'll try again. And so again, that's why we're going to have this really good team that's in the court, and we do have a really good team, but they're going to stack it against us in terms of just the legal resources.
And there's a question here. We're talking about restrictions to donations, and the question is: are there any limits to donations to this cause to fund the legal case? Might just be a simple yes or no, or we don't know.
I think the answer is no. This is not a political campaign. This is a court case. And look, we're using the resources of, so Climate 200 are not funding this. They're assisting, and we're using their organisational skills. This really is the effort of everyone. But Zoe and I are not trying to get elected. We are trying to change the law so that other people can get elected, so that voters have choices, and that is not something that interferes with the sort of engages with the electoral laws and the donation. So my answer to that is no. You're not restricted.
Thanks, Rex. Zoe, I think this one's for you. How are independent candidates, or I guess how are you doing this, making sure we better engage young people in politics? I see so many people my age who are disinterested and don't care, leading them to blindly follow people like Pauline Hanson.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in Richard's views on this as well. And it is, it's becoming harder and harder to reach people. I think, it's interesting in the world that we live in, where we're bombarded with information all the time, how sort of counterintuitively reaching people sort of where they are is difficult. And certainly on my 2 campaigns, we had youth groups that really tried to reach younger people in the electorate, where we ran events and all those sorts of things. And I know that the other independents do similar things, and we all sort of try to gear some of our social media on TikTok and the like to younger people as well. But Richard, do you have some comments on the how around that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, firstly, just to take up what Zoe said, I think there's nothing more persuasive in politics than friends and colleagues talking to friends and colleagues about issues and actually normalising politics and raising people's expectations. And you literally, like, the major parties can't buy that. Like, it's not for sale. Like, literally, it is unbuyable. Okay, so you can pay people to stand and hand out a how to vote card. You can pay someone to do that. You cannot pay someone to talk to their colleagues at work or their friends at the footy on the weekend about doesn't it shit you that the government says this, the opposition does that, and I hate living in a safe seat. What if, imagine people listen to us? It is not for sale, right? So one of the most persuasive forms of communication available is a form of communication that independents have monopoly access to. And I mean monopoly. I don't even think minor parties have that, because you can literally say, we get to decide who our local MP is, and our local MP has this unique feature that the only people they actually care about is us. They don't have a big donor to worry about, but they don't have to go behind closed doors and caucus and figure out what the West Australians think and the South Australians think and the left faction and the right faction. Like, what an independent can do, it's not make everyone happy about everything, but they don't actually have to sort of line up their agreed talking points with a bunch of other people. That's a unique, valuable proposition. In terms of all the other communication, look, there's no right answer, but again, someone that's played this game for a long time, I love social media. Like, when I started as an academic trying to get, a press release into a newspaper in the 1990s, right? If the Sydney Morning Herald didn't want to talk to you and the ABC didn't want to talk to you, you were free to get your mimeograph out and make your little leaflets and hand them to people on the street, right? Yes, social media has problems. Absolutely, there are problems. But the one problem we don't have anymore is that Kerry Packer and Rupert Murdoch decide what's on the news tonight. So it's chaos out there, and it's scary out there, and there's bad shit out there. But again, what's the army that a community campaign can organise that you can't buy? It's thousands of people on their local Facebook groups talking about the stuff they care about. So again, people want you to feel disempowered. They want you to feel like, oh, if I don't have $100 million, I can't make a difference. Well, sadly, Zoe lost by what, 100 votes, right?
Yes.
Right. Nicolette Buller won by what, 18? All right. So the idea that it doesn't matter is so demonstrably wrong.
Yeah.
It's so demonstrably wrong. And, at the Australia Institute now, like, for us, our best social media content is, someone like me or Amy Ramikis or Greg Jericho, people face a name that people recognise. It's usually us on television or radio, so it kind of looks a bit more legit because, oh, look, even the ABC thinks Richard's not stupid. But we'll get 1 million views on our social media clip. And I know from the ratings that maybe 80,000 people watched it first time round. And that's not paid 1 million views. That's people mashing like and share on their social media. That's real. And independents with a community campaign behind them have such a huge head start in amplifying that stuff. So I'm as cynical as anyone you'll ever meet, but I'm optimistic about the capacity for millions of people to make their own mind up about what they care about. I trust that more than I trust the news value of Kerry Packer or Rupert Murdoch when I was growing up.
And Richard, I think you just answered the next question, which was how, what you said about the Indies votes rising steadily with each election. Question is, how do we turn that rising into a tsunami? I think you've just mentioned how we can do that. I should just mention too, after Rex very helpfully clarified that there is no limit on what you can donate to this case, that you should see in the chat a donations link. So if people want to get straight onto that, you can do that now. I guess there's a question here about issues. So again, it's like, how do we make that trickle into a tsunami, and what issues might help do that? Is it biodiversity? Is it AUKUS? Is it the planet? Is it democracy? All these things, are really important, and we can't just wait for that steady trickle. We need that tsunami. Any gut feeling? And Zoe, I know you're thinking about a project in this space at the moment. So any sort of feeling about what issues might really help bubble this up?
Well, again, I mean, the what we're talking about in regard to the High Court intersects with the value of the independence movement, obviously. And so getting people to understand and relate to what we're trying to do in the High Court case then ties back to the kinds of issues that the independents champion, the kind of work that the independents do on integrity and accountability and transparency in the Parliament. In many ways, I feel over my 2 campaigns that transparency, integrity, accountability piece has been the umbrella expectation of members of the community who want fairer representation, who want honest representation, who want someone, as Richard said, that they believe directly represents them and takes their views forward, but also leads them, helps them to understand the need for change on thorny issues sometimes. I mean, if I was to pick a sort of overarching policy issue where I think a lot of the conversation it is intergenerational equity, actually. And that goes to all of my reasons for the work that I do today and that I have done. And the comment that you made earlier about my son, Kate, who said, someone has to do something for us, Mum. And so I think all of the independents are in there, and certainly I was in there trying to fight for the future of our kids on all of those things, on housing, on climate, on cost of living, on cost of education, on access to healthcare, equitable societies, inclusion, all of those things that we value as people. So, and I think, the broad underpinning of that is intergenerational equity, but it's also good government that can deliver to the needs of communities and listen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Zoe. What a brilliant end, because we are at time. So I just want to wrap up by saying thank you so much to our panelists, Zoe and Rex, and thank you for your courage in taking this on. And thanks so much, Richard, for joining us and always being so generous with your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you who've joined this call. It's been amazing. I can see that the chat has gone wild. I haven't been able to read it myself, but I'm looking forward to seeing that afterwards. Don't forget that the call has been recorded. So if you want to share it with anyone, it's been recorded. The donation link is in the chat. And I think perhaps, I don't know if one of the team wants to there's a QR code. Do you want to put that on the screen? Here we go. Thank you. I think the numbers joining the call tonight, and it shows the engagement people have had with Climate 200 about this, and also that people do know how important this is for our democracy. And so, if you do want to support this, there's an easy way you can help. You can click the QR code, you can click the link, and you can donate. It's just an easy way for you to help, and your donation would be incredibly helpful if you're in a position to do that. To those of you who've donated already to these fundraising efforts, thank you so much. As you probably all know, lawyers are expensive, but this is really important work. So we're really asking for people to come together and support Zoe and Rex in their really courageous efforts. And if there's one thing that this independent movement has shown, it's the power of people who come together to make positive change. So let's all remember that. And thank you once again for being with us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.